So there's some questions about design documents. I got a good Portal story in with this one. But this is kind of talking about like this really light version of it, because some people have this version of it like where they're like a 13-year-old all excited to make games for the first time, and they like detail every single little thing. And I've never seen a design document like that. I know they exist, but I've never seen one like that. And so design documents are, who are you communicating to and why? I have a light design document for myself for a game I'm working on by myself. Why do I have that? Because it reminds me. I will forget what my rules are or my thoughts are, and I need to be reminded. And so I have it at the top of the document. And then the rest of the document is just notes and ideas. So when I wake up in the middle of the night and I have an idea for this, I can write it down and make sure I get it caught. And then I have another document that is just the writing for that, so that I make sure the narrative kind of ties in with that. All works. Portal's a great example, though, of like, hey, we're not going to have a design doc. We just have this set of like, hey, we know what we're building. We're building puzzles where we introduce something, and then we take that and we combine that. Like, right, it's a really, really straightforward design. But the tone of the game just wasn't ever quite what it ended up being. It just didn't come all the way through. And one of the things was the finale. And the finale had no design around it and a lot of ideas. And so we tried things like, at one point there were like rockets going through, and it was the hardest level you'd ever played. And like that would be the, hey, I solved the hardest thing. And then the easiest puzzle, but where you had agency and intimacy with GLaDOS, worked way better. Way better. And that just kind of then set the tone for the game. And you never would have gotten that in the design document. You would not have found that out. You had to try things. You had to play, right? I'm really a big fan, obviously, of experimentation and iteration, and you do that in the roughest possible form, and you go. But then I have friends who have worked on giant games with studios that are around the world, and they have to have a pretty detailed design document. Well, at least the big parts. And they have to say, like, the thing you're going to go work on here in Yugoslavia, it needs to fit into this and have these set of rules, and we'll cover the rest, right? And then often, like, the writing team sits on top of that because they just kind of smooth over the edges. Writing, for the most part in games, just is like the wallpaper. It's just covering all the roughness of the walls and kind of keeping it all together. And that's a really good example in those kind of games. Or I'll see people with design documents when they go to pitch a game. I'll tell you what, no investor's actually going to read your design document, but they somehow think there should be one. So for the Anacrusis, we had design pillars. But here's where we ran into trouble. And I still think this is the right way to do it. It's like we had like, hey, these are the rules about how we're making this thing. This is what we're making. This is what we're going for. And this is like it's about working together. It's not about difficulty. It's about experience and like all of these things like that at a high level. And we were going to first stand up a version of Left 4 Dead, No Mercy inside of the Anacrusis. And in all intents and purposes, episode 1 is that, right? Because that way you remove a lot of randomness and you say, okay, these are the rules. This is how we're going to approach this. This is everything else can now, the monsters can be built and all of that. But the problem we had was, and once we got that set up, then COVID came. And now you're like, oh, hey, work from home. That's so easy. You're an old man, can't handle that. Shifting a company where you walk around and you go on design talks and you hang out with each other and you have like this experience of understanding exactly where people are, where their headspace is, and how we need to adjust it, how we need to grow, how we need to get out of it is a lot easier in person. Call it a failure, me, whatever. But we had people who didn't leave their house for 7 months. And so they got squirrely in their own way, right? At one point, I drove around and I dropped off gift baskets of Black Cat wine and some gifts, and then something personal that was just for them to show that, I understood who they were. We understood who they were. And like it had gotten that bad. And that took out, like people were out like, hey, my family's got COVID. I can't work for a month. You don't fire that person. And for a tiny team, that's just devastating. So that really set us back. So I still think that's the right way to do it. Just don't have a pandemic happen while you're doing it.